going through this series, 7 Words from the Cross, examining the things that Jesus said as he was being crucified and he hung on the cross. And if there's anything that a retelling of the crucifixion does, it puts Jesus at the center of it all, just like we say. But we don't want to just have Jesus as the central topic of our memories. This isn't about some sort of religious nostalgia where we just look back and remember Jesus with fondness and sadness. See, Jesus didn't stay dead. That's the great part of it. That's our hope. That's our faith. He didn't stay in the tomb. He came back to life, and he's coming back to this earth soon enough. You know, the Bible says a day is as 1,000 years in the eyes of God, and 1,000 years is as a day. So it really doesn't matter how much time it takes. If it were another 100 years or 300 years, what is that in comparison to eternity? It doesn't matter. Jesus is coming soon to this earth to usher in the fullness of his kingdom. So we're not having a memorial service this weekend. Just like Nala said, I don't want a memorial service for Samir. I want a celebration of his life. So we're not doing that for Jesus. We're not having a memorial for Jesus. We're having a celebration of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now that resurrection assumes a death. So we also are talking about his sufferings, his crucifixion, his death, but then his resurrection as well. And we can't really appreciate what it means, what that resurrection means, without revisiting his suffering and crucifixion. Because what he went through and what he said during it all marks out a path for how you and I can live and how we can face death. Jesus gave us a model of how to live, and he gave us a model of how to die even as we live. 7 words Jesus spoke. Last week, Chris helped us look at his words of victory. It is finished. Wasn't that a great experience? The week before that, Brian opened up how his words, I thirst, reveal the fact that Jesus was one of us. He was human as well as divine. We heard his horror as he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me? And how he took our place in being separated from God forever. Jesus wasn't afraid of death, but he was terrified of being separated from his Father. It's an interesting thing, isn't it? He wasn't afraid of death. He was afraid that he would never see his Father again. Then Dennis helped us remember that even in the depth of his pain, he loved us when he spoke to his mother and to the Apostle John, the word of love. And when the dying criminal pleaded for his mercy, Jesus freely offered his words of assurance. I tell you today, you will be with me in paradise. As the soldiers were fastening him to the crowd, and the crowd was the cross, and the crowd was gawking at the spectacle, and the religious leaders were standing by in their self-righteous hypocrisy, Jesus prayed out loud. It had to be out loud because we know about it. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Isn't it interesting? People just stood around and watched. People do that all the time. You go home on the freeway somewhere and the traffic will be miles backed up just because people are gawking at some horrible accident. Well, the traffic of the universe stopped dead still the day that Jesus was on the cross, just looking at that spectacle. In these 7 words, we find Jesus ministering to us, to the human race, even as he's on the cross. Today we look at his very last words before he died that day. Luke 23. By this time it was noon, and darkness fell across the whole land until 3 o'clock. The light from the sun was gone, and suddenly the thick veil hanging in the temple was torn apart. Then Jesus shouted, Father, I entrust my spirit into your hands. It's interesting, he shouts, right? He shouts. And with those words he breathed his last. When the captain of the Roman soldiers handling the execution saw what had happened, he praised God, this is a Roman now, praised God and said, surely this man was innocent. This captain had seen a lot of people die, but he had never seen someone die like this. Most people in their dying words, they just whisper. They eke out a phrase or a breath or something. But Jesus, as he dies, he shouts, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And there's some things that we need to remember about the death of Jesus. And we've talked about this each week as we've gone along. Jesus didn't go to the cross as a victim. Jesus gave up his life voluntarily. What held Jesus to the cross were not the nails, but love. It was love that held him there. In fact, earlier he said in John 10, no one can take my life from me. I lay down my life voluntarily, for I have the authority to lay it down when I want to, and also the power to take it back again. He knew what he was doing. He knew what he was doing, and he did it willingly. The second thing we need to remember about his life is he gave up his life reverently. When Jesus says, Father, I entrust my spirit into your hands, he's quoting Psalm 31:5. It's like the Jewish equivalent, the Hebrew equivalent of our little prayer that people teach their children. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. Jesus is quoting from the scriptures, rehearsing a psalm, a prayer that he learned as a child. Father, I put it all in your hands. And ever since Jesus said these words that we're going to look at today, Christians have been able to say them whenever they're faced with danger or with death. Into your hands, Lord, I entrust my spirit. So I don't know what's going on in your life today. But I have an idea that you have some challenges. Yes? No? Nobody has challenges here? Your lives are just wonderful, perfect. You came here to support me, so I'd feel better. Right, okay. I have an idea that some of you are dealing with pain. Some maybe with an unknown future or current failures in your life or some kind of crises. Whatever you're facing today, these words of Jesus can help you find and realize that you can absolutely trust in God. Jesus did it in his darkest moment. And when you and I are going through tough times, when we're going through hell, his words remind us that we can trust God. There's kind of four things we're going to deal with as we go through this. The first is this. His words remind us that we have a Father in heaven who loves us. He says, Father, I entrust my spirit into your hands. Here at the end of his suffering, instead of saying, my God, as he said a little bit earlier on the cross, he says, Father. Before he says, my God, because he felt that separation. We talked about that. But now he sees that it's okay, that his Father is still there. He's accepted him. He's accepted his sacrifice. He knows that God has not abandoned him, and Jesus knows that his substitution as a sin bearer has been accepted, and he can rest in his Father's care. But what do you and I know about God as our Father? Well, one thing I know, and one thing I'm learning, because I realize that, it might take me a whole lifetime before I really get what God's trying to say. But one thing I'm seeing more and more is that God's not like a human father. Because human fathers can be quite unreliable at times. They can be inconsistent. They can be selfish. They can abandon us. But God doesn't do any of those. What kind of father is God? A couple years ago, we went through a series on the Lord's Prayer. And we saw that he's a father who is always present. In fact, Jesus was called in the Old Testament, the prophecy of him was that he's Emmanuel, God with us. That means always present with us. He's not distant. He's consistent, and he can handle anything in your life and my life, and he is, above all things, compassionate. Your Father in heaven loves you more than anyone ever will love you. He cares about everything going on in your life. He sees everything that happens in your life, and he has the power to help you with everything in your life if you will trust him. One of my favorite chapters in the Bible, Psalm 103, says this. I love this verse. As a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who honor him. My kids are grown now, but if you're a dad, I think you can relate to this. If one of them calls me up and they say, Dad, I have a problem, I'm all over it because I want to fix it, I want to fix stuff. Sometimes they don't want me to fix it. They just want me to listen. I'm not that good at listening. Better at fixing. Well, maybe not so good at fixing either. But I can't help but respond. Even if I haven't spoken to them for several weeks, they call up with a problem. My daughter calls me up, Dad, my computer, this and that. Like, okay, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Why don't you do this? And then it's like, okay, I'll send you a new one or something. That's what she's waiting for. No. Well, God is even more that way. You can't call on God and not get his attention because he cares. He's a father who absolutely loves you and always desires to help you. Always. And see, here's the problem for a lot of us. Anybody that was raised or inculcated with, I don't even want to use the word traditional, but fundamental religion. And it could be any brand. But fundamental religion often gives us the idea that God is just waiting to see us mess up. And so when we call on him, he's saying, did you remember that I told you to not do that? Like some of us as dads did to our kids. But God's not like that. We have his attention all the time because he cares for us. Then Jesus' words on the cross, those last words remind us that our Father can be trusted. He can be trusted completely. Father, I entrust my spirit into your hands. Who do you trust in your life? Who do you just put complete trust in? Even the best person is going to let you down because we're human, right? We fail and we make mistakes, but if you're going to put your trust in someone, if you're really just going to let it go and trust that that person's always going to come through for you, better make sure that they have these qualities, that they have your best interests at heart all the time, that they know all about you, that they never lie to you. Do you know that everybody lies? A lie isn't just like a flat-out, bold-faced lie. Lies are, they can be subtle, like, did I do okay? Well, yeah, you did all right. God doesn't lie to us. He tells us the truth, but he always tells us in love. And this person, if you're going to trust him completely, they need to be someone who's not going to let you down. So do you have anybody like that? How about the government? Think they'd be like that? Or how about Facebook and the social world? Are they going to always guide you in the right direction? How about your spouse? No, don't raise your hands. All the time, I know I let my wife down a lot. I know I've disappointed her. How about yourself? Because see, that's where it all comes to in our day and age. We trust ourselves, like how I feel. You cannot trust how you feel. Your hormones lie to you all the time. You feel up one day, down the other, but God's always there. And there's only one person who's perfect in this way. It's God himself. For the word of the Lord holds true, Psalm 33:4 says. The word of the Lord holds true, and everything he does is worthy of our trust. Why don't we read that together? Because we need to get it inside. For the word of the Lord holds true, and everything he does is worthy of our trust. In the last days of Jesus' life, he was surrounded by people who had trust issues, to say the least. Some thought they knew who to trust. Some thought that they believed in him. They thought they were trusting him, but then they all, one way or another, they all struggled in their faith and in their trust of Jesus. As the events of the Passion unfolded, they were puzzled and confused because what happened kind of stripped away the pretensions they had for themselves. They actually believed the stuff that they believed, and it wasn't true because they really didn't trust in Jesus. He told them he was going to die, but they didn't listen to him. They had their own ideas. They trusted in what they'd been taught instead of trusting in the ultimate teacher, right? So today, we want to look at 6 of these individuals. We're going to do it in a unique way. I need you to just kind of like imagine here. We want to hear from 6 different individuals as if they were here in our day, as if they went through this experience with Jesus today in Claremont. And so we asked 2 highly talented, world-class actors to help us with this, Nelson Larondo and Brian Plummer, to help us convey the experiences of these 6 different individuals. And we're going to kind of break it. There's three scenes that we're going to break them up. And each scene, they represent different people. But I want you just to kind of try to get inside the heads of these individuals. Like if they were being interviewed, say, on 48 Hours. Thomas and Peter got a call from the reporter. Okay, so I just want you to watch this.
It was a different kind of Passover meal, to say the least. I remember right when I sat down, Philip leaned over to me and he whispers, "Hey, Thomas, I feel like something special is going to happen tonight." I looked at him and I said, "I doubt it." I was wrong. Jesus got up from the table, he walked over and he grabbed a basin of water and a towel. I remember at the time thinking to myself, what's Jesus going to do with the foot water? I doubt he's going to wash somebody's feet. I was wrong. He knelt down and he began to wash Bartholomew's feet. And Bart just sat there, didn't say anything. He didn't move. Well, none of us did. Jesus finished, and he went on to the James and Andrew and the rest of us. I remember at the time thinking, this is so strange and yet so wonderful. I doubt anyone's going to say anything right now. I was wrong. You know who broke the silence? Peter.
No way are you going to wash our feet. That's what I told him. He can wash other people's feet, that's fine, but he's not going to wash mine. So I looked at him and I said, Jesus, you are not going to wash my feet. I mean, you're the king. And then he looked at me and he said, well, then you can't have anything to do with me. And I'm like, ouch, that hurts. Okay, fine. Wash my feet, wash my hands, wash my whole body if you have to. But then he just looked at me and he said, no, your feet will be just fine, Peter. And in the midst of washing our feet, he teaches us servanthood.
Then Jesus took some bread and some wine. He blessed it and he served it to us. He said it was a new covenant with his blood. And he said, tonight, all of you will lose faith in me. I remember thinking right then, lose faith in you? Never. But I didn't say anything. I just sat there.
So I couldn't just sit there. I had to say something. So I looked at him and I said, Jesus, I love you. You can count on me. Everybody else may fall away, but I will not. You can count on me. So he looked at me and he smiled and he said, Peter, you will deny me 3 times before tomorrow morning. Ouch, that hurts. The next thing I knew, we were wrapping things up and heading off to the garden to pray.
So you can see they didn't really understand what was going on. And in their confusion, it deepened because the events that took place shook their trust in Jesus. But when Jesus said on the cross, I entrust my spirit into your hands, God, it meant that he was committing like you would commit something of great value into the care, say, of a bank. Maybe you put all your money into the bank, or maybe you put your valuables into a safe deposit box. Jesus is saying, I'm depositing my life into the care of the Father so that whatever happens, I know I'm safe. Before it was all over, both Thomas and Peter were faced with the reality that they really weren't trusting Jesus at all. And they fell apart because of it. So what is it that you need to put in God's care today? What do you need to commit into God's hands today? Well, I'll tell you the biggest thing for every single one of us here It's what you're worrying about. What you're worrying about today. Whatever is preoccupying your mind, what it is that has you up at night, thinking about it, you can't sleep, you need to put that in God's hands. Someone said this, and I believe it. Worry is practical atheism. Worry is practical atheism because worry, it's acting like God doesn't exist, like I don't have a Father in heaven who loves me and he can't be trusted. Worry is acting like you're a spiritual orphan. Like you're a spiritual orphan and there's no heavenly Father who loves you. It's all up to you. You know, we hear the phrase, if it's to be, it's up to me kind of thing. Well, that's the problem with that is it can't be up to me for everything because I can't handle it all. But God can. And so whatever it is you're worrying about today, you can place into the hands of God for safekeeping. Otherwise, we're just saying, well, I don't believe the thousands of promises in the Bible when God says that you know, he's going to take care of me, he's going to provide for me, he's going to forgive me, he's going to empower me. All the things that God says he'll do for us. Jesus' words on the cross tell us that the antidote to worry is trust. It's trust. You know when it's the most difficult time to put your worries into God's hands, put your life into God's hands? It's when you're in pain, when you're going through the thick of it. That's when it's hard. And when you're suffering and you don't feel like trusting God, you just feel the pain. That's why you can't trust how you feel. That's why Jesus didn't trust how he felt. Paul knew about that kind of experience. He wrote to Timothy about the things that he had gone through. This verse isn't in your outline, but it's a great one. 2 Timothy 1:12. I am still full of confidence. I'm still full of confidence because I know whom I have trusted, and I am sure that he is able to keep safe until that day what he has entrusted to me. Paul was, at the time he wrote this, was going through the most difficult of circumstances. He was going through all kinds of things. Paul said, I don't know why things don't always work out in my life. I don't know why I'm going through so much pain. I don't know why I'm in prison now. I'm a little confused about the plans and purposes of God, but I've got a Father in heaven who loves me. He can be trusted, so I am persuaded he is able to keep what I've committed to him until that day. And whatever it is you commit to him, whatever you're going through, whatever worries you have, you can put it into God's hands. And he's going to take care of it, and he's going to bring you to the day when Jesus appears. Some people say, well, I'm afraid to give my life to Christ. I'm afraid to give my life to Jesus. I'm afraid to let it go, to surrender, as we say. Because I'm afraid I won't be able to keep the commitment. Well, you know, we have a membership commitment in our church. When you come to class, our membership class, if you want to be a member, you have to sign this. And we know, you know, I tell the people, we don't police this. We don't like check up on you, but it's just a thing where you just say, okay, I'm going to commit to do these things. Just like when we see the beauty of Christ and we realize the grace of Jesus, we say, okay, Lord, I'm yours. Well, God knows, and you should know that we're going to break it. We're going to mess up. If I had to keep myself saved, if I had to not ever break faith with Christ, I'd lose my salvation all the time. Some people think, well, when you sin, you fall away and then you have to come back. Some people are baptized over and over again because they're afraid they're not saved. But our salvation is not based on what I do, what I can keep together, how I can hold it all together and solve all the problems. My salvation is based on Jesus Christ, on what he has done. It is a gift. It's a gift. And once God gives it to you, guess what? He doesn't take it back. He is completely worthy of your trust. If we are faithless, 2 Timothy 2:13 says, he will remain faithful, for he cannot disown himself. That's good news, isn't it? Isn't it good news? Because it says, even if I get to the point in my life where sometimes I'm just so messed up and in so much pain and I have doubts that is God really there? Does God really care? Even if I despair, God does not. And he is faithful and he can be trusted. He can be trusted. God says, even if you're unfaithful, I am faithful. That was so important for Thomas and for Peter and for all the disciples to remember, because they really lost faith in Jesus, right? They ran away when he needed them the most. They messed up big time. But when Jesus came back to life, did he wag his finger in their faces? No, he said to them, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I'm here. I'm with you. I will be with you, as he says in Matthew 28. I will be with you always, even to the end of this age. The third thing Jesus' words remind us of is that he's doing things that we can't see. We don't know anything about. Father, I entrust my spirit into your hands. Now, it's hard for us to wrap our minds around this, but I think most of us, if we take some quiet time on a regular basis, or even, just go out in the woods for a while, or down by the lake shore or the beach and just kind of meditate, you realize that our lives as we live them, that's not all there is to life. We're more than just a bag of bones and blood and tissue and organs and things like that, and little microcurrents of electricity buzzing through our system. We're more than that. We're created in God's image. There's a part of us that is spiritual. Now, I can't explain that, but I know there's a part of me, and there's a part of every human being, every one of you here, that is made to only have God there. It's made to interface with God. And so there's a part of us, even in our fallen condition, that is spiritual. We don't really understand it because we live our lives in such a material world, in such a material way, but we think that we're struggling with debt, and we think we're struggling with relationships and with physical disease, but the real battle isn't any of those things. None of it. The real battle is the spiritual battle that's taking place, and we don't even see what's going on. Do you know how many times God has saved your physical life? I guarantee you, when you get to heaven, he's going to open up a book. This is the book of when I saved Terry. And I'm going to probably faint in heaven, not realizing how close I came to being wiped out, and God was there. I didn't know. I had no idea. There's times, once in a while, I get a feeling that his hand is there. But so often we don't know. There's a battle going on for your soul and for mine. That there are powers at work that cannot be seen, and God is working for us in ways that we don't know. Job said it like this: when he is at work in the north, I do not see him. When he turns to the south, I catch no glimpse of him. But he knows the way that I take, and when he has tested me, I will come forth as gold. I like that. See, the disciples lost trust because they forgot, or they just didn't realize this truth. God is up to stuff that you and I don't know about. John loved Jesus, and even Judas was eager to see Jesus succeed, but they both failed to have confidence in what Jesus was doing because it just wasn't on their radar. Again, what would we hear if John and Judas had an interview today? Let's watch this one.
Once we got to the garden, it just got crazy. Jesus asked Peter, James, and myself to go a little further in the garden with him and pray. And we did. We tried. We kept falling asleep. And Jesus kept waking us up. And I remember one time he said, "The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." That's true. It's all a blur. And to think, this all got started because of Judas. Did he really think what he was doing was right?
There he is. He's the one you want, all right? The one off praying by himself. Now, the others, they'll try to come, make a scene, but it's the one that I kiss on the cheek, okay? That's the one you want. 30 pieces of silver you promised me, right? That's what we agreed on, 30 pieces? No, like I said, forget about the rest, okay? The one I kiss on the cheek, that's the one you want.
A kiss? Judas betrays Jesus with the kiss of a friend? But then it got crazy. Peter grabs a sword and he cuts this guy's ear off. And Jesus, he reaches down, picks up the ear, and put it right back on the guy's head, as if nothing had happened. And then they took him. I would love to tell you that we fought for him, but we didn't. Everyone ran, but I ran. I'm so ashamed.
What have I done? What have I done? Was I so stupid to think that I've killed him? I've killed him. I've crucified Jesus.
And the work that God was doing with the disciples, just like the work he's doing with us, he uses a process, and until we understand what's going on, we're going to have all kinds of doubts in our lives. The process is, it's kind of like the stages of grief, the phases of faith. For Judas and for John, as well as all the other disciples, they're right in the middle of this process. And here's how it goes quickly. 6 phases of faith. First is a dream. God starts by giving you and me a dream. A vision, a desire, or a goal, or ambition. It's a picture of how things could be in your marriage, or in your life, in your work, in your future. Nothing happens until someone starts having a dream. You get the dream when it comes to faith. And then you make a decision. That's the second phase. A decision. At the decision phase, you have to make the decision to go after the dream. All kinds of people have dreams, but they never decide to do anything about it. When I was a young man and I became a Christian, I got a vision, I got a dream about helping people on the streets, about sharing good food with them. So I got into restaurant work, and now I'm a pastor of a church that's essentially a restaurant every week. That's awesome. I love it. You got to move from the dream stage to the decision stage, but then phase 3 is delay. It's delay. You have to... some of you here are familiar with that stage, right? I see Tony and Mona here. They have a dream about selling their house. They've been delayed in more ways than one. When God gives you and me a dream, I'm particularly thinking of spiritual vision and dream, he never fulfills it instantly. You know why? Because God's not a genie. He's not a vending machine. You don't just like put in a prayer quarter and then, get your stuff out. And so he's there to help us in the overall process, to teach us. So there's delay. The 4th phase is difficulty. Difficulty. And now you not only get to wait, but now you have problems while you wait. Some of you are in phase 4 right now. You're having problems. It's the difficulty stage. And the dream isn't happening. Maybe you had a dream for your children, and all of a sudden you realize it's not happening the way I dreamed. It's not happening the way I dreamed. Then the 5th phase is a dead end. It's a dead end. When you get through stage 4 and you get ready to give up and you think it's not going to happen, you come to this 5th point in faith, which is a dead end. That's where it looks humanly impossible for what you need and what you want to happen in any case. My marriage is never going to turn around, or I'm never going to get that job. I'll never graduate. I'm never going to see this dream fulfilled. When the disciples saw Jesus crucified, for them, it was a dead end. But guess what? Even though you feel like it's over, it ain't over till it's over, right? The 6th phase is deliverance. Deliverance. That's when God supernaturally does a miracle in your life because you're at the end of your rope and you think it's hopeless. You see, if we succeed in our dreams before we get to this point, we think that it's about us. It's about what we've done. It's about how hard we've tried. God has to bring us to the point where we completely realize if it's ever going to happen, only God can do it. The disciples had to come to that point where they stopped relying on themselves and they learned to trust in Jesus. Paul says this in 2 Corinthians, our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. See, he could look past the troubles, the difficulties. He could even look past the dead end. And this is what he says, so we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is seen is eternal. When you're going through the worst time, the roughest situation, when you're going through your darkest hour, just remember, you have a Father in heaven who loves you, who can be trusted, and who is working beyond what you can see on your behalf. On the worst day of my life, God was working for me in ways I could never have imagined at the time. And I'm here today in this place doing what I'm doing because of what God did on that day. The last thing is God can handle anything that you give him. He can handle anything you give him. There isn't anything God can't handle. How big are God's hands? How big do you think they are? Because Jesus says, into your hands I commit my spirit. Well, God's hands are big enough to bless you and me. That's for sure. Jesus often touched people in order to bless them. He gave them the touch of blessing. He would put his hands on them. He'd lay his hands on people. Last week when Chris invited you folks to come forward, there were so many that came in response. He said, come and join me here if you accept what Christ has done for you in his word of victory. You accept Jesus' victory in your place. And so many of you came and you touched each other. God's hands touched you through the hands of your brothers and sisters. A few weeks ago when Dennis prayed for all of us here and we came up, we invited you to come forward. We laid our hands on each other. Again, God's hands were touching us, blessing us. David says, you both proceed and follow me. You place your hand of blessing on my head. God's hands, how big are God's hands? God's hands are scarred enough to never forget you and me. Can a mother forget the baby at her breast and have no compassion on the child she has born? Good question. Though she may forget, God says, if it were possible for a mother to forget her newborn baby. Now, we have a situation in our house right now. We think that there's a cat that's gotten under my workshop and has had babies. Yeah, it's not a big deal, except we have 2 dogs that hate cats. They particularly hate cats that trespass into their backyard. And it's just, last week has been just, it's been awful because it's like every time they go out there, it's and so I piled stones and bricks up against the cracks. They couldn't get in there because I don't want the dogs. I think the cat can take care of herself, but if she has had babies, she's a mother protecting her babies. It doesn't matter how mad Maddie gets or how agitated Cherry gets. That cat she's going to scratch their eyes out if they get too close. If it were possible for a mother to forget her children, God says, I will never forget you. I have engraved you where? On the palms of my hand. If you want to know how much you matter to me, God says, look at my hands. See these nail prints? That's how much I love you, and I'm not ever going to forget you. You may be going through a tough time right now. Some of you are going through tough times right now. And you may think that God has forgotten you, but he's not. He's not forgotten you. He has a daily reminder on his body, the scars in his hands. And then Jesus says, God's hands are strong enough to keep you and me secure. Jesus says this in John 10, I give them eternal life and they shall never perish. My Father who has given them to me is greater than all. And no one can snatch them out of my Father's hand. Once you put your life in God's hands, nobody can take you away. Somebody might say, well, can't I just jump out? How big do you think God's hands are? You might get near the edge. You're not going to be able to get over because guess what? God loves you. He's not going to just let you go. He's not going to let you fall out or jump out or any of that. He's going to make your life miserable if he has to, just to keep you in his hands. And he doesn't want to make your life miserable, but he's not going to let you go. When my kids were little and we went swimming, I'd stand in the pool sometimes and I'd say, come on, Heidi. Come on, Jonathan. Come on, Laura. Jump to me. You can trust me. Don't, some people have done the opposite of it, but I did the right thing. Jump to me. I will catch you, because they'd stand on the edge and they were afraid to jump in the water. And finally, they were terrified, but finally they would let go and they'd jump and I'd catch them. And then they wouldn't stop, Just kept doing it over and over. They'd want to do it 100 more times. Because once you've trusted your Father in heaven, you're going to want to do it again and again. It's a fun thing to do. It's a fun thing to do. We can actually enjoy taking risks for God. Saying, God, I'm going to watch you bail me out of this one. I'm going to jump into your hands again. Sometimes you come up to a life decision. It's like, which way do I go? Should I go this way? Should I do that? Should I take this job? Should I move to this place? You don't know what to do, but you finally come to the point where you hopefully are reminded, God's going to be with you no matter what you do. He's going to work in your life, so just do something. I've moved across this country a lot of times, making decisions. I was working in Oregon, decided to leave my job and move to Florida. Ended up painting houses and working as a gopher for a carpenter. They didn't let me put too many nails in. And I didn't know where I was going, but I just felt like it was time to move on. I had 2 kids, a family at that time. We packed up a trailer, moved all the way across country, and through that experience, God brought me into pastoring. And there's no way I could have been a pastor. I didn't go to seminary. Well, I went to the seminary of life, but not Andrews University. And in all of it, all the mistakes I made, all the wrong turns I made, God's always there. He's always there to help. He's always there to get me out of messes. He's always there to redirect me. He is not going to let you go. He's going to keep you secure. He's waiting on you. He's saying to you, trust me, I can be trusted. I'm working behind the scenes, and I can handle anything that you give me. Paul says it like this when he's going through his darkest day. I think you ought to know, dear brothers, about the hard time we went through in Asia. 2 Corinthians 1. We were really crushed and overwhelmed, and we feared we would never live through it. We felt we were doomed to die and saw how powerless we were to help ourselves. But that was good, he says. That was good. For when we put everything into the hands of God, who alone could save us, then we put everything into the hands of God, who alone could save us, for he can even raise the dead. Hallelujah for that. What if? In our videos this morning, I asked you to imagine, what if the people surrounding the crucifixion of Christ could speak to us today in our language, in our world? What if they were to talk about their struggle with trust, even as they reflected back on the trust that Jesus exhibited in his Father as he was dying? See, what if can be a little bit tricky because on one hand we start second-guessing the past. What if that guy hadn't fouled out at the last minute? What would it have been like? What if the captain of the boat there in Korea had stayed at the helm instead of turning it over to the third mate? But he didn't. And what if I had married someone else? I'll bet there's someone here today who's asked that question, done a what if in your mind. And we can go around and around with hypotheticals about things we can never, ever change. But if you do what if with the stuff you're facing, with the stuff that's in your life right now, with your worries and your challenges and your troubles and your pain, it can help lead you to trust God. So what if you and I We're to live our lives from this moment as if God is standing before us saying, jump, it's okay. It's okay. And we are to live as if we have complete trust in God's love and His reliability and His greatness, in His ability to do what we can't see. That we trust that He can handle anything we bring to Him. Our greatest failures, our deepest, darkest secrets and sins that we're so embarrassed about. What if you and I were to decide today that you would believe the dream that Jesus has planted in your heart? What if? This statement of Jesus is not just something that you can say at the end of your life, to kind of settle yourself down. Father, and I entrust my spirit into your hands. It's a statement to say every day the rest of your life, when you're afraid, when you're scared to death, when you're worried, you say to God, Father, I place my life in your hands. When you're stressed and you're angry and you're bitter against people who've hurt you, you say, Father, I place my life in your hands. When you're confused and you don't know where to go, what to do, Father, I place my life in your hands. And when you're lonely or ashamed or full of regret, you pray that prayer, Father, I commit my life, my spirit, my whole being into your hands. There were two other people at the cross, not disciples at the time, whose lives were radically changed by what they saw and what they heard from Jesus. What if that experience they had brought them also to trust in God? It's one more video.
I crucified Jesus. That's what the crowd wanted, and that's what they got. Personally, I don't think that man did anything to deserve that, but I was just a soldier, doing my job. When the governor gave his sentence, that's when I went to work. I loved that job. I felt like I was administering justice every time I nailed someone to a tree. But that man didn't deserve that.
Makes no sense. And there I was, rotting in a jail cell for stealing, murdering, you name it, man, I'd done it. I knew the next time I stepped foot outside that jail cell, man, that was it. So the guards, they came, they got me, they put me next to this guy who'd been beaten to a pulp, and Governor Pilate, he starts asking the crowd, which one of these men you want me to set free? I mean, it's obvious. The crowd's gonna say, let Jesus go. Then I was going to tell them where they could go. And then the crowd, man, they start chanting, Barabbas. I mean, they're saying my name. They're saying my name over and over again. The guards, they shoved me into the crowd. They took this Jesus off to Golgotha. In 1 minute, I'm a man marked for death. And the next minute, I'm free. It made no sense. So I followed him all the way up to Golgotha.
I was stationed at Golgotha that day. We had just raised the second criminal by the time they brought him to me. I'll never forget the way he looked. He had been beaten, spit on, whipped. He was unrecognizable as a man. Hideous. What was left of his clothes was stripped off him. He was thrown down on the cross. And then I went to work. Generally, when you crucify a man, the first hand is the most difficult. The criminal wants to get away, and he fights you. So I would have 2 guards hold him down. But this guy, he didn't put up a fight. I just thought he was exhausted. As an executioner, I've been called every name in the book. I've had men yell at me, plead with me. But I wasn't prepared for that. He looked at us. He looked at me. He said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He forgave me.
Forgive them? He said, forgive them. I mean, who is this guy? Forgive. I mean, it should have been me up there. You know what I'm saying? I was the one who was supposed to be hanging on that cross. He took my place. And then I looked up and I remember he took a deep, agonizing breath and he said, "It is finished." Then he died.
Surely, this man was the Son of God.
Lord, you know that we're not good at trusting. We trust ourselves more than anything else, anybody else often. But today, Lord, as we realize what you went through and how much you trusted your Father, help us to know that we can trust him too. We can trust in you. And Lord, you know there's people here today who have been struggling. They've been trying to make their lives work. They've been trying to overcome obstacles, facing pain, facing hardships or relational disasters. God, I just pray you'll encourage them, that you'll give them faith to put it all into your hands. That as we look upon Jesus, hanging there on that cross, he still ministered to every one of us. He spoke this word of trust to you and me. God, help us. Help us. And I just pray for those who haven't really placed their trust in you, Lord, that you'll just nudge them. You'll help them to see how good you are, how trustworthy you are, how far you've gone on their behalf. As we realize that Jesus came to be a man of sorrows, Lord, help us once again, this day, right now, to place our faith in him.